Hey, welcome to Creative Block. We're your host, V.
And Sean, aka Lord Spew. We interview people in creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on Twitter if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
Today we have with us Mikey Heller. Tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Mikey Heller, and I'm a cartoonist and a writer, and I write specifically for animation.
It's really fun because I first knew you through your comics, and I found out afterwards that you worked in animation. So it's really interesting to see how comics and animation like really intersect.
Yeah.
I kind of want to take us all the way back to kind of like as a kid, did you kind of always know you wanted to do comics, cartoons, or was it something that you stumbled on like a little bit later in life?
No, I think comics and cartoons have been a main interest since I was a little kid, and I always knew I wanted my career to be centered around that in some way.
And did you kind of like pursue it early in school? Like did you like go like take these like art classes in high
No,
school
not
or
not really. I took a lot of art classes in high school, and I was going to go to school for animation, but then last second decided to study video production instead.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, I don't really. I think it was just a question of what school seemed like the most doable, the most affordable, and I thought, well, let's do video production.
What college?
I went
Or
to Ithaca College.
what state?
That's up in upstate New York
Nice.
or central New York. And yeah, I went there, I studied video production, and I didn't really study much art or writing. I just took a lot of production classes because I figured this will be how I can get a job. Because even with writing, I didn't know like you can't go to the writing factory and work in the mailroom. Like,
Ah.
so I just thought I'll study video production. I'll work in that field, and hopefully one day I'll magically get the job I want.
That's funny because you're a writer now and you studied video production
Yeah.
and so you've been more interested in the writing side of things rather than the art side of things, or for you were these like always like tied together, like these two skills?
They were always kind of tied together. So even in college, even though I was in a video production program,
Mm-hmm.
I was on my own pretty much focusing on uh cartooning, comics, or I used to perform a lot of comedy and just doing my own thing. So the program itself became very tertiary in my life, and I was still mostly spending all my time
How's
on my little projects.
how's comedy influenced your writing process? I'm sure that there's some similarities or some influences in between there.
I don't really know how it's influenced because I it certainly helps create, add or create a sense of humor.
Mhm.
But when I think of how I write now, it's very story first.
Oh, okay.
And to me, things like the jokes are, you can replace those forever. It's all about if the story works. So my most um that's the most important priority for me. But so I think comedy just helped me shape a style of humor and sensibility, which I don't even think about that much because I think it's just an inherent style. I'm not really thinking like, is this a joke I would write?
Oh, interesting. So yeah, you're just like, is this funny? And then you just like,
Yeah, if it's
yeah.
funny to me, I just move on. But I really rely on that just being instinctual. I don't think too hard about it.
That's funny because I feel like sometimes you have like some comedy buffs that are like very like formulaic, like this is how you do your
Yeah.
setup and this is how you do
Hmm.
your punchline and da da da. Did you ever take any like comedy classes, kind
No,
of like
I
stand up
I
or
no, I'm a little anti-comedy school. I don't think it's something that can or should be taught.
really interesting? Let's
Uh,
hear about that
well,
philosophy.
I mean, I'll take it back because there's plenty of great people who are in this field, but Yeah, I think a lot of things involving comedy performance is something you learn mostly from doing and not from listening to someone tell you how they do it. There's a lot to learn from hearing anyone's process. I used to devour podcast after podcast of just comedians talking about their approach, their experience, and that's very helpful, but nothing's more
Also,
helpful than just doing it.
that's kind of, yeah. So that's kind of a sort of like almost like that was kind of like your school a little bit, like listening to these podcasts.
Yeah.
What were your favorites? What are
Oh, just any podcast where some comedian would talk too long about and really glorify themselves. This is like maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and that was the heyday of that time. People loved that stuff. But I think it's good to absorb and learn and take classes, but I think it can get dangerous when you're being like someone's telling you this is how it's done. I think that's always a dangerous philosophy to adopt.
Well, I like danger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. If you can go in and
If you want to walk on the wild
Yeah.
side, take some comedy classes.
Yeah. Very true.
I love it. That's so yeah, that's but I mean it is true. That's why there's like, I don't know, like a school of thought, I guess. That's where that kind of comes from, right? It's like if you want to do this kind of comedy and like kind of fit in that mold, yes, take these classes, I guess. But if you want to be more of a creator, like a more of like a little bit of like a like have your personal sensibility. I think it's always kind of hard to find yourself, right? To find your own like
Absolutely. It's so hard to find your own voice or identity, especially when people are telling you what it should be, or you're seeing how other people are doing it around you. I think this applies to every creative field, like pressure to adhere or fit to a mold.
right, especially because this industry is like so like it's an industry, right? We like create a product for a like an audience, right? So it can be really easy to be like, okay, how do I not lose myself in that I don't know, I say that, but do you feel that way when you write for like cartoons versus like then for yourself?
Not really. I don't know. I'm very much like, well, when you write professionally, you do need to just, you are a hired hand and you need to write into the voice of the show, even if it's not your own.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel very lucky on Bears, as I feel like a lot of people worked on Bears got to help shape the show and the way things were kind of constructed in terms of the crew, is everyone had their chance to put their fingerprints on the tone of the show. So I felt very at home writing stories for the Bears. I liked doing it, felt like stories I would tell myself. So I got lucky in that way.
And I'm gonna go back a little bit just to kind of, so you went to school for video production. Were you like doing a lot of stand-up comedy at the same time? You said like school didn't take up as much time. So what was your life like a little bit at that time?
I would go to school. I mean, this is just one of those typical college experiences in America where you just sort of go to school because you're told to,
Yeah.
and you just take the classes that you're told to take. So I was in a video production program that was totally fine, and I enjoyed it, but I was way more passionate about just putting on little shows in or around campus and drawing a webcomic, and that's where all of my real energy went to. And that was very important. It was a good Ithaca College was a great place to kind of form adult you. That's what I got out of it, I think.
I like that way you're saying this, like shape your adult self in college, because it's kind of like that moment when you're like a little bit more independent and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you, after you finished college, what was your life like? Did you like get a job soon? Was it a job in animation? What kind of
No,
happened?
I had a bunch of random jobs. I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm from Rochester, New York, which is not too far from Ithaca. And I went back home with my degree in television and radio production.
Oh, radio production too, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. Just did some audio classes, and then suddenly it's also my degree. And I tell you, I don't know anything. It's just on there. And That's just what it was called. So I go back home to Rochester where there's only so many jobs. So I had a lot of very odd jobs here or there. I worked at a salad store and I chopped salads for a while. I had a job where I was going to people's houses and asking who they were voting for. So I got yelled at a lot.
That must be
Uh,
tough.
I worked at I was an assistant for 2 wedding DJs, and I would just write wedding DJ schedules. But
Did
the job
getting
I had the longest was, oh, sorry, what was you
no,
saying?
I was just gonna say, did getting yelled at by strangers help you on stage at all? Like, well, I mean, like
No,
these people are way meaner than me on the street when I try to, get them to sign up for something or whatever.
no, no, not
No.
really. I mean, I personally find public speaking super easy. Um, it's easier than you just talking to one person. That's what I always think.
Okay.
Oh yeah, all right, yeah, that makes sense because you're not like the interaction is not as intimate in a sense, right?
It is completely controlled if you're doing it right. You know, if you go
Okay.
on stage, it's essentially a one-sided interaction. Doesn't have to be, people talk, but even those are controlled experiences. The person on stage is guiding and knows what they want to do with the conversation.
Mm.
So to me, it's easy. You know, there's nothing to be nervous about. Um, and so yeah,
Yeah.
I was doing all these odd jobs and I was performing um, in Rochester or around it with my friends. And then I was a PA at a PBS station, WXXI Rochester. I did
Mm.
that for about a year. And that was a great job, one of my favorite jobs I ever had. And after a year of just doing all these crazy of all these random jobs and like wondering what to do with my life, I moved to New York
Mm.
to just do more cartooning and more performing. And I had a job there just working for this guy's website. I helped run it. And I still wanted to work in animation, but I still didn't know how to do that.
It is hard, especially when you
Yeah.
don't, when you don't have that much information out there,
Yeah,
especially for TV,
yeah, I
right?
didn't, and I studied television, so I knew about like I knew how I could be a PA or coordinator or something, but that's not what I
Mm.
really wanted to do. Um, and then I was drawing web comics and posting them. I had been doing that since college. And while I was in New York, I got reached out to by Daniel Chong,
Really, that's so
creator of We
cool.
Bare Bears,
Hmm.
saying he liked my comics. They're starting production on the show and wanted to see if I wanted to try writing. And he's like, "Do you have any interest in this?" And I said, "Yes, actually, it's my main interest."
I feel like this is it's a running theme at Cartoon Network, especially because regular show did that a lot too. They approached a lot of
Absolutely.
comic artists, especially for either storyboard driven shows or shows with a lot of um, uh, gags that need to be tied closely to writing. But I hadn't ever really seen that at other places. Was this a strange thing to you where you're like, what, like I've never even heard of this kind of
No,
thing? Or had you heard about that kind of thing
I
before?
had heard of this, you know, I had seen Regular Show and Adventure Time pulling webcomics people or
Oh,
indie
I see.
comics people.
So you were like, now it's my
And
time. Yes.
I thought, hey, this I guess that's how it's gonna
That's
happen. It's gonna
awesome.
happen from the comics. Um, and I just gave it a shot. I had no idea what I was doing. I look at some of the old stuff that I would send in, and I'm just appalled at how amateurish it is. But Daniel really took a chance on me, and after like a summer and fall of freelancing, he offered me a full-time job. So I packed up and I moved to LA and I became a writer, and that was 8 years ago.
That is so cool though. I feel like what's funny too? Like I got a test for We Bare Bears.
Oh
Daniel also
wow.
like reached out. I was not in the States yet, but I was not the right fit for the job.
Okay.
I'm way too Nickelodeon for bears. You know what I
Uh,
mean?
okay.
Yeah, that's so funny. But yeah. I took the test twice for that show for both.
Wow.
But yeah,
Okay.
I'm not the right fit. That's really cool. I love that story. And I wanted to ask you, how often did you update your webcomic? Because it's something that I kind of hear a little bit when I look at, like, like kind of big name webcomics people. They're like, oh, you have to update like very regular, like have like
Yeah.
a regular schedule. What was your schedule like?
My webcomic was called Time Trabble, and it's essentially just my Instagram now, but this was back when you had a website and people would go to the website to hang out there for a while. And it's just gag comics, and I didn't have a regular schedule. I would try to at least post once or twice a week, but I didn't have, like, every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever at the top of the page. But
Right.
it was also, this was maybe 2010 to 2013,
Mm.
where comics would really blow up on Tumblr, or earlier, like Stumble Upon or Dig or something. So
Mm.
even though I wasn't posting regularly, comics would just kind of spread out. And this is just kind of still happens, but that was the start of that, I think. And I used to joke the last place people would see my comics was probably my website. And
It's so true though,
so
right? I feel
yeah.
like, oh, man, yeah, social media really, because it's funny you're talking about Tumblr, because I mean, I'm sure everybody who's listening right now, like, we're still kind of in, like, are we still doing
Yeah.
Twitter now? Where's
Yeah.
the platform? Instagram's hard, like the algorithm's just really
Yes.
slow. I'm just gonna say it. I think TikTok is where it's at. Everyone just
Okay.
there's the slideshow. Comics are doing really, really well on
I saw
TikTok
I
now.
just saw the
Yeah.
slideshow thing. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that is gonna be big. But it's crazy because at the time it was a little bit, like, we weren't changing platform. I don't know. Yeah, back when we had websites.
I miss websites, and I'm sure it'll just keep changing into another version of itself, and we just keep having to adapt. But uh,
Yeah.
it was it was a fun, wild thing where you would just release something out into the world, and it would spawn off to every possible outlet, because everyone had their little place they would check on stuff. So I assume that's how Daniel and Cartoon Network people saw my comics. They just stumbled on something somewhere.
Yeah,
So I
I'm sure.
wasn't.
Yeah, Tumblr was really big. I remember
Yeah.
seeing a lot of comics on Tumblr. Like uh Maddie Sharafian.
Oh yeah.
She was on Bears at the beginning,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Right when I started.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
was maybe the one of the first people ever hired on that show.
Whoa. Yeah, her stuff's awesome. And she drew these like really cute comics with the rabbits, and
Yeah.
now she
Yeah,
has
her
like
style
a
really shaped the visual tone of the show, I think. At initially.
yeah,
It's
that's
so
really
good.
cool. Well, let's kind of, so you started as a writer, a freelance writer,
That's
and
right.
then you became in house. What was the difference? What was it like being a freelance writer? And then,
Uh it was very different. I think the show had just started, so I think Daniel was even learning, like, how do you freelance a writer exactly? Because I was doing all sorts of things. Initially, was I was shown the pilot and a few storyboards because that's all they had at the time, and he said pitch some episode ideas,
mm,
and I pitched a few, and he said, you write an outline of this, and it wasn't even like quite the premise. He fashioned a new one that was much better, and
mm.
I wrote the outline for that one. Then sometimes he would send me sort of a paragraph or a page of notes for an episode they want to write, and I would then write the outline of that,
Mm.
or fix an outline, or I even boarded a short once. Um,
Also, you also
and
did some boards, huh? That's kind of
just, I mean,
cool.
it's one short, and you can tell I boarded it because it's two shots. Them at the computer and then the computer. That's all you need. Please don't make me draw more. Um, and so and essentially this was my testing and learning. This was
Mm,
over, a good chunk of months, and I think he felt comfortable hiring me because I had a history with the show at that point, as the first season was getting going.
Mm.
But when I first showed up for my first day, I realized I have no idea how to how to write on a show, how to be part of a crew, how to break story with other people. It was a whole process. And not only that, but the show itself was in its first season, so it was also learning as well.
So
And
you were obviously already strong at writing jokes through comics, and I mean
yeah,
probably a little bit of habit built up through stand up. What was your process like learning how to write the story for, at least for that show? I mean, I don't know if you already had a strong story grasp before that, but I'm sure that was probably a
yeah.
hurdle.
I thought I did and realized I did not. I certainly had seen a lot of movies and thought for some reason that meant I knew how movies worked, but I think I needed to see how it's done and participate. Uh, I wasn't even after like a full year did I feel comfortable. Like okay, I think I do know how to do this job. And it was purely through practice and being in meetings and seeing other people just do it and seeing other people do it different ways, just knowing that there's always going to be a different approach. Um, so just through practice, I figured how to uh, have story structure in my brain and the best way to lay out a story, etc. But it was a bit of a learning curve for sure.
What would you say, looking back, were the things that you like really had to learn? What was the things that you were like you felt like you were struggling with, and
Yeah.
what would these things be?
I think there was things for me individually, and then I think there was still the show itself was learning how to write a We Bare Bears story.
Yeah.
And I think the first lesson was to be super open up top. And I'm sure we were doing that, but I think we used to write these outlines that were very detailed,
Mm.
overly detailed. They were really long. And they were like, and I think the idea was like, oh, we'll have it all down. So it'll be easier for everyone later. And it turns out the opposite happens.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting. How does that make it harder to have something too
Too
detailed?
many details, too much gets, if someone read a really detailed outline, for a 6 to 11 animated show, that's like an 11-minute show, an outline should be like 3, preferably less pages.
Mm-hmm.
If it's more than that, that means there's too much information. And if someone new read it, they're not going to see the story. They're just going to get a lot of details. Should
Oh,
be as
so it's
clear as possible what each beat is for. And if you keep it to that information alone, it should be a pretty easy to read short document. And I think it took us a while to realize that. We thought, oh, if we take care of a lot of details now and add a lot in, that's even better. But it took us a while to learn. No, it should be short and sweet. And then that'll allow for stuff to change in an additive sense rather than having to fix problems later.
Was We Bare Bears a storyboard driven show or scripted?
We Bare Bears was storyboard driven, and then We Baby Bears is scripted.
So I wanted to ask you, as a writer, what it was like because a lot of writers don't have that experience of sharing that writing process with the artists, and
Yeah,
I'm sure there's probably some writers that feel some type of way about it too. I was just curious
yeah.
about what your feelings are about that form of making a show in general.
I love I either like I'm not I don't think either is better than the other. I think whatever serves the show and the crew, I'm sure there's always going to be one option that's best. But I really loved writing outlines for board artists, and I think I was lucky on Bears because the board artists would be very involved in the writing, or they'd be sitting in on meetings, or we pitch things before we even wrote them down. So everyone would get a chance to like be familiar or have their say or put their stamp on something before it got to them. And that would probably make things easier for like changing things for the better in the boards. And I loved writing something and seeing how essentially someone would make it come to life and make it way better or simpler. Just I was not possessive with the writing at all. I've heard stories about writers kind of being at odds with board artists on shows, and I just don't
Mm.
understand why that should happen, because you are sharing the same job.
Yeah.
They are your fellow writers. You should treat them that way.
Yeah, I think there's I was this is a very long
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
discussion to have. I think it's really interesting. I love kind of like thinking about what's kind of makes like a board driven show versus a script driven shows. I've mostly worked on script driven, so that's kind of where I think from my perspective, it all depends on schedule. I feel
Yeah.
like if you have the schedule that can allow for a board driven show, yeah, hell yeah. But I think sometimes studios are trying to be like, hey, let's just get it, like,
Yeah.
see if we can squeeze on all the work. And then that's kind of when it, like, I think like there could be moments when like there's a little bit of like tension, because then it's like, nobody has time, and and it becomes like really crazy.
Absolutely.
That's really fun though. I'm like, it's really interesting that you did both. And I was gonna ask, how big is the writer's room when you were on Bears, when it was support driven?
Let's see. So it would be me and one other writer full time. And occasionally we would bring someone in on like a temporary or part-time stint, but it was usually just two of us. And
oh yeah, that's not much. That's not much at all. Yeah.
But we would have our writing meetings with the showrunner, the director, and the creative director. And then often we would pull other people into the meetings, board artists or revisionists. So our meetings felt like full writers meetings, but there was only two of us ever typing anything.
Right. Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because I feel like writers' rooms, like actual writers' rooms, are pretty rare in animation.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I was on Loud House, we did like, there was a writer's room, and the scripts that came out were like super solid, because they had like I think it was between 6 to 8 writers.
6 to 8 writers.
Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was, and I'm like, because I think don't quote me on this, like, everyone, but I think it's the more Disney approach, where like they actually have writers' room, where like it's like live action, but instead of writing live action, they write cartoons, and the scripts that come out are like so like tight.
Nice. Yeah, I like the intimacy of a small team, but then you do start to feel
the weight of the workload.
Yes, the weight of the workload. So on Bears, we just got one more person, so there's 3 of us, and on Baby Bears, I should say, and we would freelance when needed. And I think we figured that out, and that worked for us. But you could always use more writers.
Yeah, right. I feel like it's kind of interesting, because when I was on Thundercats Roar, we also didn't have a writer's room.
I've heard about that.
It was just the Marley, who we had on the show previously, who was a head writer and co-producer, and Joan Ford, who she was the script. Is that script editor? Is that I always forget the
story
term.
Editor?
Story editor. That's what it. And then all the writers are freelance. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask you, how many freelance writers did you have on Baby?
There was not like a regular. We would just do it when we did it. So and some people would freelance once and not again. Some people would freelance a handful of times. So there's just like a handful of them. But there was a few stretches on Bears where I was the only writer.
What?
Yeah, that happened a few times. Not for too long, but there was a few times where I was the one. Yeah, I remember when I was promoted to head writer, it was while I was the only writer.
Oh my God.
And I thought that was funny, because I was like, all right, I'm in charge of myself now.
Because Cartoon Network does a lot of episodes. That's a lot on. I mean, because it's storyboard driven, I'm sure I guess it's a little bit less crazy than some people might jump to think. But
I weirdly didn't feel like the I never felt overworked when that happened. It wasn't for too long, but we were also always ahead of schedule,
Okay.
Oh,
and
That's good.
nice.
That's good.
we're just writing outlines, and I think it happened twice at both of those points, whether it was for a month or two. We just had our process down, so I never felt like panicked. But we eventually would find someone else and grow the team.
Did you get a little stressed out though?
Weirdly, what was stressful was finding someone.
Oh, really? Yeah, it
The
was it.
search was stressful, not the writing. I didn't mind just pumping out an outline. Like our process was so good that when we wrote it, I just felt good about it. If we had a story that a big thing on Bears wasn't so much writing a story, but deciding what story to write.
Right, yeah.
And I think we also learned how to do that, when to jump ship on an idea that we don't want to accidentally spend a month on.
Can you talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit? What
Sure.
goes into thinking about like what ideas worth taking? Because I think a lot of artists, whether you're young or old, you go through that decision making process. Like, oh, do I
Yeah.
art already takes a long time. How
Yeah,
is
I
this good
mean,
enough?
on the first season of Bears, it was very hard because it's just hard to learn how to make a show with a bunch of
Yeah.
people also learning. And of course, initially Daniel has ideas. He has a full season's worth of, I want to do this. Some are as detailed as this is the story I want to do, or some are as vague as I want them to be in this setting, and we'll figure it out from there. But of course, you try to break a story and you start hitting your head against the wall, and you spend too much time on it. You feel locked in because you got to hand something in soon. And sometimes we just have to pull the trigger on something. But after our first season, I think we learned when something felt like, oh, that's for sure something that could be very solid. And oh, that's something that we just don't know what that is, and we should set it aside because we don't want to spend too much time. And also, we just want to be excited about what we're writing for.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an idea and it excites you, just keep going with that. If you're tired of the idea and you're still trying to break it, it's gonna be hard and not fun.
Yeah, it's funny because I really do that a lot, like just making comics as like a side thing.
Yeah.
And when you start like drawing a couple of panels, and I'm sure you felt that way with Bagel High, right? Like you start like drawing these characters and you give them these little funny lines and you're like, this is fun, let's just kind of like
Yeah.
keep hanging out with these dudes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
so
it can be
cool.
very hard to find that groove for yourself. But I think we definitely did find it on Bears. And then honestly, I always felt like we had too many ideas and we had to just pick or get everyone on the same wavelength about one. And then my favorite stretch is in the last couple of seasons, it felt like the show was just handing us ideas itself. There'd be an episode where someone's cousin was in the episode, and I just look at it and think, well, that's an episode.
Oh, that's so cute. That's
It
so
just felt,
cute.
yeah, it definitely felt like it was just constantly generating its own ideas based on the world that everyone was building. A story artist would add this to an episode and feel like, well, that should be a future thing we should explore. And that was my favorite, when it was writing itself.
That's so funny because, like I was listening to, I think it was, I don't know, Joss Whedon or something, like talking about writing on Buffy or whatever. And like he's like, well, yeah, and then when you have your outline and then that's the hardest part. But then when you finally can sit down and write a dialogue, that's fun because it writes itself. And I'm like, what does that even mean?
I feel that way. Yeah, I think the hard part is the story, but the characters are strong. They do. That's what I also felt by the end of Bears. Like, they just feel like real people to me. I professionally have been in their brains for this long. They do in my head write themselves. I know how they would talk. I know what they would say. But that's just in the construction of the show that everyone worked on, is just a very solid base for great stories and characters.
That's magical. Like, I don't know. When fictional characters come to life, I don't know. I think that's just like so magical and cool.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like have that? Did you ever feel like you had that experience before Bears, like in your personal work or anything, like having characters that you knew that closely?
No, not really. Because I was drawing comics, but they're all kind of just gag comics or kind of comic strip type of things. There was nothing that I was sitting with for that much time. I was going in 40 hours a week to just think about what the Bears would say. So even after 1 year of that, let alone 8, um, they just become very real in your head, which is good. It's good tool.
Have you ever dreamed? Have you ever dreamed about them?
I think I've had work dreams where I'm just at work,
Okay.
but nothing ever. Not like I'm hanging out with them or anything like that. That'd be cool though. I'd love to do that.
Gotta get on that lucid dreaming.
Yeah, I'll lucid dream. I'll hang out with the Bears.
Oh, that's so cute. Were you able to keep doing comics as you were writing?
When I first started, I suddenly didn't have any brain space to draw stuff for myself.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, for years my webcomic kind of fizzled out, and I'd upload something every once in a while, but almost never. And it wasn't until like 3 years ago that I started pushing and trying to draw again. And I had to re-teach myself how to do it, essentially, how to do it in a way that was low pressure and fun. And that meant drawing things fast and loose and kind of purposefully bad and not thinking too hard about it.
No, but I think that's really great you mentioned that. I feel for like, I want to talk about webcomics a little bit.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I do feel like webcomics are like, it's hard because you don't make money from it.
No.
I mean, I'm trying to figure that out and it's tough.
I say all the time, I wish, if I was my age now, 20 years ago, I'd be doing all right selling t-shirts with my an ad space. Like I remember that era of webcomics. I was like, man, they were really making money. Probably not a ton, but enough to pay rent just on their comic about guys talking about video games or something.
I know which one.
I missed my chance. Yeah. Oh, I know which like 10 that is. I miss that era. That was kind of cool.
It's true. I feel like it was almost it was another form of the internet. But I do feel like you said, like, because you have to like keep uploading like regularly enough. Definitely, there's like things to think about to be able to meet that schedule, right?
Yeah, so like I said, when I got my opportunity at Cartoon Network through my comics, that I was updating, but not every day. But now, because you are at the mercy of an algorithm that favors certain behaviors, you have to just do that if you want eyes on it, so you might get an opportunity. So it comes with a lot more stress that I think is not fun, and kind of sucks the life out of it. Because it feels like I'm at Instagram Studios and Instagram boss is ever watching.
Have you
but the trick is to make it your thing. Sorry, what are you saying?
Sorry for I just got excited. Have you ever had one of your comics like pinged by like I don't know, basically the SNPs of Instagram? Because they do have a thing where it's
I didn't even realize that's been happening to a friend of mine. His comics have been getting pulled from Instagram. I didn't know that happened.
It's crazy.
Like I knew it happened for all sorts of content, but it never occurred to me that it would happen for a comic strip. But no, it hasn't, which I'm surprised. A lot of my comics, my recent years of comics, I guess it's just people saying weird stuff. There's not a lot of weird imagery, but it's not for kids.
Yeah. I have a friend who's like told me like Facebook has been tough because like there's like Facebook and Instagram, because there's stuff like if you get a little like too close to politics, it can get really dicey fast.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, or like
I did not know that.
Yeah, because it's kind of like I don't know, there's stuff like also things that he had a comic about a plastic plant that realized that it was plastic, and it was like, what is my life amounting to? And then it like hangs itself. It was like, no, you can't do that. Even if it's a plastic plant.
Wow, all right.
Okay.
Okay, all right. I see.
It's very specific. It's very like
but
adult
that
SNPs. Yeah.
yeah, that does, like, I kind of get it because it's a public space with a lot of eyes just could see it that don't want to, but
Yeah.
you should have an outlet for whatever weird thing you want to draw.
It's it's really interesting. I mean, I guess you could still do your own website, I guess, but
That's
yeah.
true. Yeah, that's what my friend did. He said, just go to my website.
Yeah, it is.
see it.
It is interesting because it should be like, oh, then if you don't like that, don't click on that and like it and follow them. Like it should be
But
as
that's not how
simple as
things
that,
work.
but that no, it's totally not how things work. I have had many cartoons and like full animations taken down from
Wow.
Yeah, because your
from
stuff's pretty out there,
Concept,
Sean.
yeah.
So
my stuff is a little more. I do a lot of like adult comedy kind of stuff.
Okay.
And, yeah, I've had at the very least, like I've known a lot of the shadow ban kind of stuff. Like I'll post something,
Yeah.
and even though it doesn't get taken off, like everything I post after it gets like barely any.
Tanked.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's frustrating.
Well, as long as it's somewhere and people can go find it.
It's true. It's
Because
true.
ultimately,
it's true.
the people who really want to see it will follow your instructions and go check it out. Your active fan base will see it.
No, because sometimes like the way this is now the big tech podcast. We are not longer
cool.
talking about animation, just big tech. No, but because sometimes when you're shadow banned, even your fans, even
sure.
your followers don't see
Oh,
it.
yeah, I
It
have
gets
seen
pushed.
that, yeah.
It's like people have to literally like that day think like, ooh, I wonder like what Lord Spew's like is up to today.
I have
and,
to
like,
go to his profile.
type out the
Yeah,
name
yeah.
and the profile and stuff.
Okay.
Which, yeah, it's pretty because I got shadow banned once because I posted too many links in my stories. I kind of took a break, and then I came back to Instagram, and I was like, in my stories I was like, oh, by the way, check out this new episode of Creative Block, and then next story, check out this new thing I put up on my shop, and then I think I posted like 3 stories with links, and then Instagram was like, looks like a bot, and then I had my link tree in the bio, and then it was just like, there's too many links, we can't have all
too
these
many
links.
Goodness,
you're a bot.
It took so long to figure
Bots
it
love
out.
links.
Yeah, because it's like, because none of it was like bad, so I was just like, what did I do? Yeah, but
I'd like to talk just a little bit about what your personal creative process is like when it, from like the origin of coming up with a story or a joke, or like what starts first. Do you start with a funny idea and then expand into a story? Like, because I think
this for bears or for just writing for comics.
Maybe what if we start with comics first, because that came first.
Okay. Yeah. I think I didn't really know what my process really was when I was younger, drawing comics like 10 or 12 years ago. I would just sort of, think of something I thought was funny and just draw it out, scan it, color it in Photoshop. Now I think I think a little more about it, where my philosophy is whatever is in my brain, I should draw to release that thing. So it could be as simple as if I just watched the Jonathan Taylor Thomas Huck Finn movie and it's in my brain, I should draw something about Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I should draw something about Huck Finn. I should draw something about painting fences or something like that. That's whatever my preoccupation is. I try to really mind that, because I think that'll help my brain release some gas.
Some farts.
And and I just and what I really like about drawing 4-panel comics is oftentimes I'll just draw a 3-panel comic and then I'm stuck with a 4th panel that I just have to figure something out, and it can
funny reaction in the last panel.
Yeah, funny reaction. Someone staring off in space, or someone just sort of talking more than they should, and it's really funny to me. And I think the other thing I like to capture is just making it clear that I had fun thinking of the idea or half the idea or something. I just want that lightning in a bottle. I couldn't draw this fast enough kind of feeling. And so that's kind of my process now, just kind of trying to think off the top of my head and keep that energy until it's done. If I labor too long, it won't be fun and I'll think it's bad.
That's relatable. It's hard when you're like, like how do you feel drawing Bagel High versus your one-off comics? Because Bagel High is like it's serialized. So sometimes there's moments where you just like you have to get the story moving and you can't just skirt around,
Sometimes a comic strip is just connective tissue or it's not even funny or something. Yeah, I started Bagel High because all my comics were just like little gag comics, just some random thing. And then right at the start of lockdown, I just clicked in my brain, I'm just going to keep drawing this one bagel comic. I'm just going to keep it going for a while because I no longer had any outside stimulus to inspire other comics. And it was really fun to use some story stuff I'd learned from my job and put that into my just for fun thing. So I then outlined a story, like I approached it like my job. I outlined a story and I paced out the comics that way. And it was so much fun to do it that way. And the characters felt very real. They started to feel very real. And now in my head, I know how they would talk. I don't even think hard about it. And but the one thing I learned, and it was the most important lesson, was my numbers, the Instagram numbers of it all plummeted.
Really?
I was losing followers. The likes went way down.
Wow, really?
But I committed to doing the story, and I was having a blast doing it. This was a maybe 40-something part story over a month and a half, and I didn't want to stop, so I just sort of tried not to care.
Yeah.
But the other thing I noticed was the comments went way up.
Yes. Yeah.
And the lesson learned was, okay, I think even if I had comics that were getting thousands and thousands of likes, a lot of those people aren't even following me, or they saw that comic, liked it, and never looked at something I ever made again.
Yeah.
And then these people in the comments for this new comic, they're the people who like what I make and they like this story and they connect with it and they're waiting for the next one. And it made me realize that this hunt for the big numbers and the big follower count is sort of a farce that we've been fed. And it's hard to see that those active people who actually like what you do sometimes, because so much of it is you're just content in a feed and that's it.
Dude, that's like so I really admire that you were like I try to be like you. I try to not like think about the likes and the numbers too much, but it's hard. It's hard.
It's hard.
There,
you want it. It's a barometer of some kind for sure. But I think every time I've done a few Bagel High stories where I'll just do a stretch of it for about a month or so. And I always joke like time to weed out the non-believers. But the people who want to read this, they'll stick around and they're going to comment and they're going to read and engage and share. And it feels way better now when that happens as opposed to, a comic strip going viral just because, that particular comic spoke to people, which is nice, but they're not like attached to anything else I'm doing.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Sean?
No, I was just thinking about Instagram. It's like, we've run some numbers and the tests have shown that circles do not do well for the algorithm. I'm afraid that you're going to need to change away from bagels to maybe a different shape. Turns out
toast.
Rectangles do pretty well. Maybe a toast, some sort of rhombus-shaped character if you want to spice it up.
Cannoli? I'll do something else. Anything. Whatever will appease the Instagram gods.
No. It's funny because it's true.
Yeah.
Your comic has been flagged. We have there's an algorithm.
It's insensitive to the gluten allergic.
So our algorithm thinks that your bagels are breasts, and you've been getting flagged for.
Well, free the bagel.
Free the bagel.
For the
All right.
bagel.
I have to draw
they should-
bras on all my fucking bagels.
Yeah, I'll blur them out. I'll draw the whole thing and pixelate it.
That's so crazy. And how did you, okay, so how did you come up with Comics O'Clock? I think it's so cool. I've
Oh, yeah.
never heard of an event like this before I became aware of Comics O'Clock. And
Yeah.
how did you come up with the idea? When did you start it? How much work is it to
Yeah.
put every month?
Comics Clock started about almost a year ago. We started planning at least a year ago.
Mhm.
And I had heard about comics reading shows. I mean, they're all over. There's so many still in Chicago or the Bay Area or Toronto. Like every place with cartoonists in it. And I was in New York like a year and a half ago, and some really cool people were doing some comics reading shows, and they did an open one, and I showed up and just read some comics, and it was the most fun thing I'd ever done. And this was after I had kind of stepped away from performing, so I think it scratched that itch that I missed. And I just thought, well, LA should have this. I feel like LA, my thesis with the show is LA is not known as a cartoonist city, but there are so many cartoonists here.
That's
Between
That's true.
comics people, animation people, film people, there's so many amazing comic artists in this city. So I know there have been some comic reading shows in a long time ago, and I just thought, well, I mean, just need a projector and a microphone. And once I was thinking about that, Heavy Manners Library opened its first location on Glendale Boulevard, and I talked to Matthew, who runs the space, about it. And it was a perfect fit because it's an alternative library specializing in zines. And that's exactly the kind of place you should do a comics reading. And they opened their new location, which is in Echo Park now, and we decided to push it till that opened, and that was February of 2022. So we're going to bring it back in next February, and that'll be the 1 year anniversary show.
What? That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's so fun. Like,
it's so fun. I have a
Yeah.
blast every time. It's fun. People who come really want to be there. You can feel it. Like, they really like what this is about. They like the space. They
Right.
like the artists, and a lot of it's just a cool chance to see cartoonists read their work through their voice and through their mannerisms.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's so cool too, because like, so many comics artists. When I went, the couple times I went, you always have this great curated like panel of very different styles. So you do have the like 4-panel comic webcomics type artists. Like, I remember one guy had like a kind of more hippie, very like artsy. He like played a little bit of music during the
Oh,
reading. That
sure,
was
yeah.
really cool. And then you have like more illustration-y, or like kind of like more like kind of
Yeah,
like comfort comics, where it's kind of like,
I try to keep it as varied as possible, so that, I tell people they don't have to be even funny. This isn't a comedy show, it's a comic show. So my comics are all very silly, but I'm very excited when someone has a comic that is serious or is dramatic or a memoir or a more slice of life or funny in a different way. I kind of try to make sure to have it be as much variety as possible.
and like, obviously Heavy Manners is, if anyone's who's listening is in LA and wants to check out a really
Yes,
cool,
it's
awesome library, just
the
like,
coolest place in LA is Heavy Manners Library in Echo Park.
it truly is. They always have like good shows.
Yeah,
I know you always run out of tickets for Comics O'Clock. Have
it
you ever
it
thought?
consistently sells out. But I will say, if you ever see it sell out, just try coming anyway, because some people don't show up because they bought tickets ahead of time. We usually are able to pull it. It hasn't been a problem yet.
Because I was gonna say, have you ever considered like maybe going to a bigger place, or do you just like really love that spot and will like commit to that spot?
I feel attached to it being at that spot. I would like to do a big show. I haven't planned it yet just because it would take a whole lot of emailing. But I would like to do a big show in a large space with a lot of artists, and but that would be more of a one-time thing. But I really like it. I think it feels special that we're in the basement of an alt library in Echo Park. It feels very it's very cool and punk. It feels very special and not overly. It feels like this is very special to tonight, and it's not happening elsewhere.
Yeah. I agree. I love that vibe. It's very, we all get sweaty.
It's a hot down there.
It's great. No, it's really cool. It's really cool that like I said, I had never seen like something like that before. So just knowing that this is something that's happening, and like, how long did you like hope to keep it running?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I mean, I like doing it, so there's no reason to stop. And my list of people to have on the show is so long. I feel like I haven't even chipped away at it.
Nice.
There's so many more cartoonists, and there's no reason to not have people do it again if they feel like it. It's just we just have a lot of people, a lot of cool artists, a lot of cool cartoonists in LA. And we did the comics fair last October, which was fun.
Oh, I'm so sad I missed that.
Oh, it was
dude.
great.
Yeah. Was it also Heavy Manners?
That was at Heavy Manners, so we did it. So it was like we did the comics clock, the reading, and then the next day was the fair. So it was like a big comics weekend, and it was a weekend of a ton of familiar faces, and you see people, a lot of cartoonists who have been on the show keep coming back to watch, and it's just kind of fun to see a little group of regulars and familiar faces kind of grow around this one thing.
Yeah, that is so cool. I might ask you some...
Oh yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, you go for it. Sorry. I just remembered one more thing.
No, you go, because I was going to go into the question. This is the part of the episode where I'm like, no, you, and you go like, no, you.
Okay,
for like 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I will say that there's like other comics events happening, and it's been really cool to see post lockdown era pandemic, more comics events happening. There's Permanent Damage, which is a fair and reading that happens at Permanent Records.
I love that one.
Yeah, that's been going on for a while, longer than Comics Clock. They just do. I think they do it like 2 or 3 times a year, and I've seen a few more happen around town. There was just a little mini fair pop up at Stories in Echo Park, and it's so exciting. I'm all for more events, more comic stuff that people, because comics is such a solitary activity. You're either making it alone, you're reading it alone, and I think people are really hungry to be out and around others who like this thing.
That's very true. I feel like, the only difference would be like that I can see on the internet right now can be like if you create a community around your comics or your art, like through Discord. Because Sean,
Sure.
I know you have a Discord for like around your art, and I have like a Discord for Rodney, and I think that can be kind of nice, but it is all still internet. It's still like fans that are like,
I'm sure everyone gets something out of different versions of it, but I think people just want to connect with each other somehow.
Yeah.
I feel like our comics people have to be protected because I feel like and animators, like, I mean, there's like a union. There's these shows that hire like 60 animators at a time, and like there are shows where there are multiple comic artists being hired. But I mean, there's a lot of comic artists out there that are trying to figure it out, and I can tell that they're, with these events, they're trying to come together. We have to protect these endangered species.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's that new, because there is a comic syndicate that is like a big deal, but that would be like if you do the Sunday funnies for the
Yeah.
newspaper. But that's, I feel like that is now, I don't know. It feels like it is such uh a different space than like
Yeah.
what we do. We're like we're like the web people, so we're like a little bit. I don't know. I love the word. I it's so close to my heart, but for some reason, like it doesn't have the same prestige in the eyes of
Absolutely.
you know. Yeah, it's kind of funny to think about. I have some questions from the patrons.
Oh, let's
So
hear it.
yeah, so from if you support our show on Patreon, you can ask some questions on the Discord. And so from Laura Sparkles, hi Laura. How was your experience writing for We Bear Bears? Was the work environment and the writer's room as calm and nice as the show? Thank you.
Uh, Overall, working on We Bears rocked. I loved it. Like any show, there's the things that make it stressful or times where it's not as carefree as you'd like to be. But I think Daniel Chong did a great job assembling a crew that connected with each other and connected with the work. And that just created a really nice time and great environment. And the writer's room was so fun. I miss it. We would sit in one of those windowless rooms in the studio that if you're in for too long, you start to not know what time is. But it was full of like all these drawings from the show, and we would just laugh and go down YouTube rabbit holes. And I think when we got into a good groove with writing the show, those meetings were just pretty much really fun and just checking in with what we're working on and then moving on. And yeah, overall, it was a great experience.
Yeah, it sounded like you had like a lot of fun. And also just like when you were saying that you never felt like too crazy stressed out. I'm like, that's nice.
Yeah,
That's like how
I
you can
don't.
tell a
Yeah,
show is run well.
and that's not, that's only speaking my experience. I'm sure there are tons of people on the show who probably felt stressed all the time. But as a writer, I had it. As a writer, when you're at the very beginning stage of the process, there is much less pressure. And I'm not speaking for all writers, but I know from my experience, we were right at the beginning, and if we did our job right, the only people who could make our job hard was ourselves.
Mm.
Um, so it of course gets stressful, but it's nothing like the stress of a designer or a board artist who has a very regimented schedule that is so hard.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, like shipping. I mean, sometimes, if you can talk to production and you're like, come on, give us one
Yeah,
day.
yeah, you can figure it out, but
But yeah, I hear that.
but overall, I don't think I think it was only a handful of times. I think when we wrote the movie, that got really stressful.
Oh yeah, how was that
Not
different?
so we wrote, 100+ episodes of We Were Bears, and we really like this is how you do it. We are a well-oiled machine. And then they said,
Mhm.
do a movie. And then suddenly we were like, well, there goes all the skills we have for writing an 11-minute episodes. We have to figure out how to do this now. So it was just a whole other beast, and we felt very, I think you can kind of feel the stress of like we have to deliver. We have to deliver on the promise of a movie, and we have to figure it out, and we have to do it together, and we have to make decisions. So it became a little less carefree because there was a lot to care about, and we eventually figured it out. But even when we were boarding, like myself and my co-writer at the time, Chris Mackay, um, we got to stay on the production while they boarded the movie, even though we were
Oh,
technically
cool.
done writing.
Mhm.
And that was something that uh, Daniel fought for, and he was totally right to do it because we had to rewrite the second act of the movie.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
like I think he had, he and a lot of people on the crew had worked on movies before, so I think he just knew this is
Yeah.
coming and we were prepared. So we got to stay on and give thoughts and notes on boards as they were happening and help, just give another set of eyes to those things. And then eventually we had to do more rewriting. And that process kind of kept changing. Eventually we were even scripting parts of the movie. to
Oh
relieve,
yeah,
just kind of
interesting.
relieve an artist of one less thing to worry about. And
Yeah.
uh, so that became stressful because we were once again in the deep end and not totally sure of our process anymore. But we just had to figure it out.
Yeah, so if I were to like boil it down, like the most stressful part is like when you don't know, when you don't have
Yeah,
a structure to fall back on rather
absolutely. I
than like
think,
doing the work.
yeah, because then, when you're in the first season of a show, like there's that expression, like you just have to survive the first season. And a
Yes,
lot
yeah.
of that is people haven't decided how it's done, like how
Mhm.
every little process is done, or people are being indecisive or slow to pull the trigger, or you just don't have the experience to know exactly what's best. But once you know what the process is, and hopefully it comes sooner than later, or already when you start, um, that structure can make things way less stressful.
How
So when I get stressed, when I don't know what's going on.
how long did
Yeah.
it take for you to feel like you understood how to write on the show? Because I heard once that it I've heard once 1 full year, because you sort of like you go through the
Yeah,
process and then you also see how the episodes turn out once they air,
yeah.
because sometimes
That's
you feel like you need that. How do you feel about that?
that's absolutely. I feel like it took me 1 full year to feel like I knew what I was doing.
Wow. So you were a little stressed out during 1 year.
Yeah, I would say during that first year, I was stressed out, and it was mostly just me on my own. Like I
Yeah.
also had just moved to a big city on
Yeah.
my own, and I was homesick, and just life was a little stressful. So um, yeah, I was a little bit on my own for a bit, but then once things start falling into place, that at least stressful thing was gone.
Yeah, that's great. I actually think this is like such a like insightful take to say like when you don't know what's going on, it's stressful, because that's how I felt
Yeah,
on shows where I didn't know like kind of what was expected, or like even on the art side of things, right? Like I'm like, what are we, when I'm like, what are we doing? I'm just like,
yeah,
oh, panic.
because you don't
Uh
know, like, am I wasting my time? Is this all work for nothing? Like,
yeah.
you might accidentally work super hard on something that is, yeah, just uncertainty does not do well in a production at any stage.
Yeah.
It should be very certain. You should get to rely on the certainty of others. And if it's not there, that's when things get stressful. That's one thing, at least.
Um, we have another question from a patron. It's something that we've kind of covered, like talking about before, but let's hear the like boiled down version of that question. So from Bialin's Bear, how does your writing process change from writing on your own in the webcomic versus leading a writer's room in the TV show?
Yeah, it's different because one is purely for me and one is in service of a bunch of other people. But I think I kind of mentioned this, where when I was doing Bagel High, my process was more influenced by what I had been doing at work for the first time, and that changed for me. So sometimes when I have a more long form kind of thing, a longer comic or something I'm writing on my own, I just try to manage myself like I'm the head writer of me. And I just try to do it like I'm my own little, and that helps because it's something to rely on, and I don't feel lost.
You hand yourself a slip that says "I'm fired."
Yeah, I'm fired. Yeah, I know. I reprimand myself. I tell myself to
Oh,
work late, no pay.
yeah.
But
You're not
so
getting that
yeah,
over
it's
time.
yeah, it's probably gone the other way, where my professional life influenced how I manage myself. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't do anything, because without that structure, I just kind of procrastinate and don't make choices.
Yeah, it's so easy to just get stuck there where you're just like, I'll do tomorrow. Like,
Yeah,
oh, this isn't good enough. I might as well just not do it. And it's like,
yeah,
no, you gotta like do a thing, or else it's never, gonna exist.
yeah.
So from our at bird with socks underscore on Twitter. Hi guys, may I ask, in the industry, do writers collaborate with storyboard artists much? What things do story artists do with your script that you guys love and don't love? Hey.
No, good question.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I've heard for every show it's different. So on the show on We Bear Bears, we tried to have the writers and the board artists to have a lot of communication and be around each other a lot and have the artists privy to or even pitch what's going to be written next. And then that was harder to replicate on We Baby Bears, which was scripted because we went remote.
Oh, that's
And
true. Yeah.
that really made it hard. But we did want to tell, like, we tried to reiterate a handful of times that I'm more concerned if we write something that the board artists don't want to draw, because there's always
Mm.
something easier. One example I remember, and I'm glad this artist brought it up, but in a meeting we had like a crossbow, and we may have done a few crossbows at this point just because we can't do guns, so we do crossbow.
Yeah.
And they said, why the crossbow? Does it have to be a crossbow? And we were like, no, why? And they said, well, they're hard to draw, a lot of lines. And we were, of course, like, it never needs to be a crossbow. And we changed to something else. And I'm all for artists speaking out against something because those, there's nothing should ever be like married. As long as the beat of the story remains the same, they should feel licensed to change something.
Does it have
And
to be three bears?
yeah, you can, if you need it,
I
if
don't
you have
want
to kill
to.
Panda, it's fine. It's okay. You can put a little name tag on one of them and just say I'm two bears on there.
Two bears in a trench coat. Just draw one bear in a
Yeah.
trench coat and just say
You
that
just
they're all
want them
there.
draw them as 3 circles with no details. That's fine. We get it.
No, but it's funny that you mentioned that because I remember hearing that on and you can talk about this one because you worked on regular show, but I remember hearing that regular show sometimes would ship some panels that were just like some lines on the like it was very
Like, you get it.
artistic. But I don't know, maybe that was in the early
Oh,
seasons. That
yeah,
was from someone that was in production.
So, regular show we storyboarded on paper. So I think that there's probably a few times when storyboards may not have been as. Do you mean just storyboards weren't as clean as?
Yeah, it wasn't like super tight.
Yeah, I think they had a layout department on that though, so I think there was a little bit more to catch it. I think that they had people that would
layout
fix it a little bit.
Layout.
But yeah, I definitely there were definitely a few boards where I look back at those boards and I'm like, hey, the writing I think we did is pretty funny, but the boards are pretty minimal, or at least for me. I was just like rushing through to try to just because I mean that's what happens essentially when you're like every time you pitch the boards, you're rewriting all the dialogue like after the pitch, as well as redrawing the panels bigger, especially on paper. So yeah, it just overall there felt like there wasn't a whole lot of drawing time, but
that was also the case on Bears, right? Mikey, like you guys would kind of like re-polish the dialogue with every like pitching passes.
Yeah, we if we saw, it was based on anyone's schedule, but often if we were ever in a pitch meeting for whatever week, we could suggest things here or there, or sometimes we do a punch up pass meeting. I think that was something maybe we only did for the movie, but and then we would get the recording scripts and try to either punch up dialogue, but I wasn't a fan. I mostly would just try to make lines shorter or easier for the recording's sake. So the actors could get through it quicker or easier, or have one other option, alt for the animatic, just in case something was a better option. But yeah, there's always going to be passes at the dialogue, whether it was something just the board artists did themselves, or sometimes Daniel or would do it, or we would do it, just to usually make things simpler.
Yeah. But yeah.
Oh, you had meant a line of dialogue. I thought that you meant just a line drawn on the board. Sorry, I got confused. You had meant that like it just said like line here. That's what you had meant, like underneath the boards.
Oh no. I meant no, yeah, sorry. My brain just went all over the place. But no, when I was talking to you, Sean, I was talking about the drawings,
Okay.
because you guys were talking about like hard things to draw. So it's like sometimes, you know, like
Yeah.
I don't know. That was where it made sense in my brain.
Dude, there's been so
you
many
answered
times.
it correctly.
There's been so many times when I've wished that the writers and the storyboard artists could communicate on a show. Like I've had to do a fight scene in a crowded bar where they, you know, it was insisted that there was like a whole crowd full of people, and the one character's in a wheelchair, and wheelchairs are hard to draw to, and like just like
they
everything.
love to do
Oh,
that.
boy.
Like I feel like adult often has these like, let's do an orgy or like a big party or like it's a speech given in front of the whole school, and it's like, come on.
Yeah, dude, it's hard. It's hard. Sorry to derail things. It clicked in my mind that when you had said line, that could have meant a line of dialogue or a line drawing. So.
But it's true that I feel like having that bridge, that communication between the writers and the artists is so invaluable, because there was a moment on Thundercats Roar when I started boarding on an episode, and I was like, we do have that launch where we kind of tried to clarify intentions and stuff. But as I was really like digging into the episode, I was like, I'm not sure what we're trying to say with this episode. And fortunately, Marley just happened to like walk by, and he was like, how are you doing? I was like, man, I'm not sure what we were doing here. And like we kind of like hashed it out, and just like having that like 10-15 minute conversation, I was just like, oh, now I know how to stage this, because I know what we're trying to say, and I can have all of the characters act and be positioned in a way that will highlight that theme, or like these wants and goals, and it's just to say that having board artists and writers talking is really freaking
They should
great.
talk, but I've heard of shows where there's absolutely zero communication or even tension between the two camps, and I always think that's such a loss for both, because
there's some studios
both a
where
valued resource.
Like where it's kind of like, like, oh, they like, I think the philosophy sometimes is like, people do their job, so it's like a little bit like more separated and I guess cleaner in the hierarchy in a sense, and maybe that's like a way for like production to feel a little bit more like confident in as into like who does what, because it's true that like if you have all the departments talking and production isn't aware, then it can get like a little stressful, because it's like I don't know, I don't have the email with that conversation, you know. So I could understand that side if trying to play the devil's advocate. That's my hobby. This one is a funny question. I think it's because I'm pretty sure I know the answer. But from L Draws and Stuff. Have you ever read the We Bear Bear original comics?
Oh yeah, I've read those.
They're really cute. I remember there's not that many of them, right?
No, I think it's funny. There's I don't know, like 5 or 6 pages of of just these comics Daniel drew and posted on Tumblr.
Yeah.
So yes, I've seen them.
It's a funny question.
And they're not canon, so don't worry.
And now's the we're gonna hit you with the hard question.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
Creative block. Have you experienced it? If yes, what does it feel like? And how do you deal with it?
I'll be honest, I don't have creative block very often. Maybe for a single comic strip. Especially there's a period of 2 years where I was just drawing one every day. Some days I just didn't have an idea. And the way I dealt with it was I would just have to accept that, I would tell myself this doesn't have to be good. And then I draw something that was bad, and sometimes the thing I drew I still liked. So relieving the pressure, because sometimes it's less having an idea and wanting to have a good idea. And especially in writing, you just need to start making a bad thing, and then either that's the thing you made, or work on making the bad thing less bad.
Now, is that your same
I love that.
process for working on something like We Bear Bears? If you're trying to think of a good idea for an episode or a joke or whatever it
For
is?
yeah, for no for like bears or baby bears, I really, yeah, there wasn't any shortage of ideas. It's just you could think of anything, and that was never a problem. But for writing a script, I tend to just write the worst draft possible really fast,
Mm.
and then I just work a long time on making that good, because otherwise I'll never type if I'm trying to make it good right off the bat.
I honestly think that's one of the best writing advice I've ever heard. Like
Yeah,
Aminder has also had a very similar answer, which I really loved. It's like the vomit draft, right? It's just like,
yeah,
no, she actually, I think what was really fun when in what she said was like, I try to make it bad on purpose. Like
yeah.
she's like,
There's these drafts of baby bear scripts where they're like swearing at each other and saying weird shit, and it's just because I need to, like, okay, he would say
Release the
something here, I don't know
scripts.
what.
Release the scripts.
Yeah, but also it makes it fun. It makes it like, okay, this can be so weird and bad as long as it gives me the placeholders of where something would go. But you never know,
Mhm.
something good might come out of that non-thinking writing, and I might keep it.
I think I think in a sense, would you say you're a perfectionist, Mikey?
No, I'm a little bit of an anti-perfectionist because I don't think anything could ever. There's a great Jack Handy quote, which is everything's it's eventually 90% as good as it's ever going to be. So you can toil away forever,
Mm.
and it's never going to hit this magical 100%. So I'm all for, I like the feeling of completing something. Um, I don't like the feeling of perfecting something.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like I think I don't know if you feel that way, Sean, but I feel like there's a lot of artists that are like very much perfectionists, and then
Oh yeah.
it's kind of scary to write something bad or to draw something bad, you know?
Yeah.
There's like a little bit of like that feeling of like, why am I even doing this if it's like
Yeah.
trash?
I,
But
I think it's worth thinking about writing a rough draft as being like you do a sketch for a drawing, and then
Yeah,
you
Mhm.
clean it
absolutely.
up or you change it or you draw it 3 times or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I'll even write a bad draft and then I open a new blank script and just rewrite with, and look at the other one for reference. I'm essentially just writing it again, but I at least did it. This one will definitely be better than the other one,
That's so
just through
true. I feel
through
like,
sheer practice.
yeah, man, it's something that I got better at doing when I'm drawing. I'm not at that stage yet with the writing,
Hmm.
but when I am struggling with a drawing that I've been like noodling with and erasing, and then I'm just like, time to just throw it away, start on the blank canvas, and then and these new lines are already so much better because I've learned so much from like that previous drawing that I was
Yeah,
noodling with, and sometimes just like going through that process of trashing that drawing like 3-5 times, and then it's like, oh yeah, hell yeah, like I got it. And I feel with writing it's the same thing. Even if you rewrite the thing, you still go through that like mental energy of like, yeah, I remember that this is kind of like this beat that's supposed to happen, and
yeah.
oh, actually I can land it that way, whereas before the other words were kind of like keeping you from, I don't know.
Hmm.
uh that's so cool. Do you uh do, do you have like spec scripts, like like how writers are like, they have like their like writing packet and stuff? Do
Yeah,
you
I have other scripts, but when I also like to, if I ever show something, some show like, here are my scripts, I also add comics because
oh
I
yeah.
because there's a while where we were looking for more people to hire as a writer on Bears, and I got really tired of reading scripts because scripts aren't that fun to read.
Mhm.
And I just said, can you just send me a lot of comics so we can, and I'll have fun reading those, and they'll give me a better idea of the voice and tastes of the artists. and they write because they wrote a comic. So, and I like when people send spec scripts, but also something else, because that just gives me a better idea of what they're about. So I send comics, and I think that helps.
Yeah, I heard that originals are doing better than specs.
Absolutely.
Now.
Yeah, you're right. I don't have spec scripts I don't have like a Bosberger spec script. I just have original ones. I get a spec script is good. It shows that you can adapt to the voice of another show. But I feel like if you're confident in the voice of your show that you're running, you should be able to get people on board with that if they're a good writer. That's just my personal opinion. Also, spec scripts can be feels like you're just reading fan fiction. A little weird.
Have you ever read a spec script that was like, you know, formatting away from being an actual fan fiction?
No, I haven't. I've read plenty of, some people like do these kind of almost satirical spec scripts, like the guy who wrote the Seinfeld 9/11 episode.
Oh, yeah.
And then that got tossed around a lot on Twitter and eventually landed him a job on, I think, Family Guy or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that kind of makes sense for the tone. Yeah.
But that was sort of a conceptual spec script. It wasn't necessarily, it was like a parody of the idea of the spec script. But it still functioned the same way.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to plug on this show? Like, I guess we talked about Comics O'Clock and Time Trabble, but anything that you want?
Yeah, Comics O'Clock is a semi-monthly show at Heavy Manners Library in Echo Park in Los Angeles. So if you live in Los Angeles, keep an eye out. Follow Heavy Manners Library on Instagram. I post comics sometimes still on my Instagram, and new episodes are coming of We Baby Bears on Cartoon Network.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the big three.
Cable, right? Or also HBO Max.
I think they drop the next day on there's something like that on HBO Max, but yeah, there's plenty of episodes on HBO Max if you also want to watch those. And We Bear Bears, still a great show.
Yeah.
It's available to stream.
Well, that's the end of this creative block. Mikey, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to our listeners. Follow us on Twitter at CRTVBlock, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor Clements for editing the podcast and Malik for helping us produce the show.
If you love our show, then support us on Patreon. It helps us pay Malik and Clements for all the great work they do on the show. And, you know, like random stuff like Zoom and Drive and just like all these little things. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews as well as bonus episodes. Click the link in the description of this episode. I've been your host, V.
And I was Sean, aka Lord Spew. Keep being creative and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.